We are back. Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you on Wednesdays from 11 to 11:50. Glad to do so. Introducing Christians to each other and other folks around Indianapolis who are doing good based on our tagline coming out of Titus 3:1-8 and 14. Do good, do good, do good. That's our focus. That's what we want to emphasize consistently. Our Christians who are doing good around Indianapolis. We are promoted and sponsored by the Comenius Institute. At the Comenius Institute, we cross three bridges. The first bridge is into college. I teach down at IUPUI with a great set of colleagues and faculty. Glad to be there. Teach a course called Reading, Writing, and Inquiry, baseline freshman course, helping students learn how to think. But I'm also engaging young Christian college students with the kinds of questions that they might have about their professors and the issues that arise on a college campus that they might not have heard about before. Those kinds of things, talking with faculty, students, all different kinds of folks there. The second bridge we cross is in the community, which is what we're doing right now with our radio show. We've been doing this for 4 years now. Glad to be able to be on the air with HB Bell and Radio Next. Thankful for this outlet and grateful for the opportunity to introduce each other to each other around Indianapolis in community. The third bridge that we cross is into culture. By culture, I mean anything that has to do with an interpretation of the events around us. And so you can pick up on this through our websites, comeniusinstitute.org or .com, or my own personal website, warpandwoof.org. That's WARPANDWOOF.org. You can also go to our Comenius Institute YouTube channel where you can find all of our video. So the cultural connection, if you want to check out something like Truth in 2, where we're teaching Christian truth in 2 minutes, one Christian truth in 2 minutes. It's all story-based. It's done with great digital help by our wonderful digital helper, Josh Collingwood. We're grateful for his work, and we do that every single week as well. But today, we are grateful to be here once again to introduce you to a group from Indianapolis that is doing good, Circles Indy. So you can go to circlesindy.org and find out all about these good folks and the kinds of work that they're doing. We're introducing you here today to Marie and Jill from Circles Indy. Thanks ever so much for being with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
We're grateful for your good work. So the very first thing we always do with everybody is do a little bit of bio. So tell us a little bit about yourselves, whatever you'd like, and then we'll launch into Circles Indy.
I'm Marie, and wife and mother to three. I wear two hats professionally. I'm a part-time bivocational pastor at Garden Baptist Church on the west side, and the other hat is I am the coordinator of Circles Indy here in town, and we're coming up on our 9th year of having Circles in Indianapolis.
That's wonderful.
And I'm Jill Chappell, and I, similar to Marie, I'm a wife and mother of 3 kids. Professionally, a pharmacist that does clinical research working from home, and Bricks Alliance board member. Circles passionate volunteer, and have been involved with Circles for about eight years now.
That's great. Thanks ever so much for sharing about that. And so just, by the way, Jill, so if we have any drug needs, we come see you. Is that right?
I can answer questions.
You can answer questions. Nice move there on that. That was good. Yeah, so we're talking about Circles Indy. The very first thing, obviously, we need to talk about is what in the world is that, and what do you do around Indianapolis? Why is it called Circles? Let's start there.
Circles is a relationship-based poverty initiative that encircles motivated under-resourced neighbors who want to get to a better place. And we do that by recruiting people who want to make a difference in the world and teaching them to be allies, then matching them with those motivated individuals that we call circle leaders. They form a circle and they develop an intentional friendship over the course of 18 months where they don't try to fix each other, but they walk alongside each other, and really cool things happen as a result.
This is an interesting way that you phrased this. You said under-resourced neighbors. So what are they under-resourced in?
It's not just financial.
Yeah.
It's not just financial.
No. it can be a variety. It can be family relationships. You wanting to have a family, they live here, but family is elsewhere, or whatever dynamic. It can be health. It can be one thing we talk about is social isolation. So,
Yes.
Well, that's a big
poverty, financial poverty is a focus, but it's not the only resource that we address.
One thing is community. The need for community is huge, and we believe that real change comes from relationships, and that's why we harness the power of community to bring change.
That's great. And I love the word harness. You're harnessing community to bring change. That's really good. I wanted to jump back to something that you just mentioned, Jill, which, just kind of, if anybody's listening to this, hearing these words, and they're hearing the words social isolation. Wow, this is a big deal. I mean, loneliness is a big deal. We actually now have, just this past year, for instance, Great Britain announced that they have somebody on their cabinet that speaks to the prime minister, and his department is something like the Department of Loneliness. I mean, they actually have somebody like this now. So talk about why social isolation is such a problem, even in Indianapolis.
Well, I think it affects people from all backgrounds and walks of life. People come out to volunteer with us in order to build relationships and have to engage themselves in community, just as well as the folks that are trying to motivate to trying to navigate and become financially self-sufficient. Can get caught in monotony of the same thing over time, and not being able to meet people from different life experiences. And so that's kind of the underlying premise of circles, is bringing people together from different life experiences. Helps everybody.
Right.
We emphasize it's a two-way relationship in all cases.
The other side of the coin of battling social isolation is tapping into social capital. So one of the things that people in middle class particularly don't realize that they have is social capital. What we know is that we cloister ourselves in our society socioeconomically. Usually people in crisis or people in poverty, our under-resourced neighbors, only know people that are in poverty. And so if we want to suggest that there is another way, or if a person wants to get to another place, they oftentimes don't know who to talk to, who to emulate, who to even express their desires to, that can offer an alternative way of living, or other thoughts. So when you come to circles as that middle class volunteer, they say, well, what do I have to do? I say, well, you don't have to do anything. In seminary, I learned this phrase, ministry of presence, and I use that phrase a lot. It's about showing up.
Yeah.
Now, as a middle class person, there are some things that you have had ingrained into your existence. You understand the value of paying your bills on time. You understand some navigating the middle class world, and our institutions, hospitals, banks, schools function in a middle class mindset. So as we welcome our under-resourced neighbors into community and create these intentional friendships, we also can help them to have an additional toolkit by virtue of learning from one another what it takes to navigate the middle class world. And the old adage that it sometimes takes, it's who you know. People in middle class can connect people in poverty to the bright people to get that job interview or to get that resource. Now, we don't have to do the job for them. They can get the jobs on their own, but sometimes they need an avenue to meet that person that can get that resource that they need. So that's what I mean by under-resourced. it's not that they can't get the job, it's that they don't have the avenue to get the opportunity.
Yes, this is fantastic stuff. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Group site. I get so wrapped up in what we're actually doing here that I forget to tell everybody, hey, this is who we are and what we're doing here this morning. But we're talking to Jill and Maria about Circles Indy. And I wanted to pick back up on something that you just mentioned a moment ago, too, about the connections that you make with individual people, and it's a two-way street.
Yes.
So what is it that, let's say, for instance, you get 5 or 6 different folks, financial, social, spiritual connections around an individual person who needs help. What is it? What is the growth process for the people that are helping or sent to help? Yeah, Marie's pointing to Jill here, so I guess you're
well, volunteering with Circles is a different kind of volunteering, and so from the very beginning, I think coming to this realization was one thing that's come out of it. When you come to Circles to volunteer, we say just come and be who you are. And it's about your life experience and sharing that with somebody else. And so there are ground rules of we don't give money, we don't give things. It really is about developing the relationship and gaining insight into problems in the community that you wouldn't maybe have personal experience with, and realizing the barriers that people have, breaking some of the myths that you may think of that people have, and really understanding those issues at a deeper, more personal level, experiencing yourself. So for example, I was partnered with a circle leader. I was the ally, a volunteer, and partnered with a circle leader. The person was losing their house, being evicted. And so, helping my friend, I reached out to different shelters around the community, and after phone call, I realized there was no shelter available. And so having that personal experience really opened my eyes to, one of the barriers in the community is not having enough emergency housing, not having enough affordable housing. In another case, trying to find an apartment, for a family of a mother and 4 kids, with a limited income, trying, where would I go and look for housing, and not being able to find that. Now I have a better understanding of the need for affordable housing in the community. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. The issue of actually discovering the need.
Exactly.
That's a big deal. Yeah, HB's nodding his head over there going, yep, seen this, been there, done that.
Yeah. After doing this almost 9 years, I can unequivocally say that the number one issue in terms of poverty in Indianapolis is safe and affordable housing. If I could just get that 2 cents in.
Yeah.
There are other barriers, but safe and affordable housing is the number one issue.
Yeah. You can throw in any 2 cents you want. We want everybody to hear what you have to say about these things. I wanted to come back to the social capital issue. Let's kind of tease that out a little bit more for everybody so that they understand what social capital is, because I think when we first hear that, I don't know, do we really know what that means? So give us some examples of social capital.
Sure. Well, we all have what we would call bonding capital, and that's our relatives that we can call on, our maybe colleagues that we can call on. But really, you've got to be able to reach beyond that to make headway. Once you get that safe and affordable place to live, you need to be able to start working on getting a job that is appropriate and that pays enough. And oftentimes our circle leaders, our friends in poverty, don't have resources to connect with beyond that bonding capital. That's where social capital comes in. It can be in the form of a church. It can be in the form of an agency that is helping them to address a barrier. It can be an individual. It can be take a lot of forms. but it's beyond that immediate bonding capital, because let's face it, if you're in poverty, probably those immediate sources of capital are going to be probably in the same boat that you are. So one of the jokes I say is, for the middle class, if the car breaks down, chances are they're going to be able to call AAA. If you're in poverty and your car breaks down and you can't get to work, you're going to call Uncle Al. Uncle Al may not be able to help. So building up the resources, because folks, we can't get anywhere in this life without other people. And if, as a middle class person, think about the people in your life that have afforded you the ability and the opportunity to move forward, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a youth pastor, whether it's a pastor, a friend. We have to increase that social capital in the lives of our under-resourced neighbors for them to be able to move ahead. And it starts with safe and affordable housing. It moves to job readiness, job placement, and then after job placement, where most of our social services kind of stop, it's keeping the job. It's one thing to get a job. It is a completely different animal to keep a job. And so most of our resources go into crisis management. Circles kicks in beyond the crisis management when the job placement happens, and our goal is to help undergird that person to keep that job. Now, what really happens in this process, or what can happen in the process, is a person will be in dire straits. They'll get services from an agency. They'll maybe get placed in an income-based housing situation, and then we think everything's okay. They've connected with food stamps or whatever benefits they can, and then they'll say, okay, now get a job and make it happen. What oftentimes can happen is the person will get a job, maybe paid $8, $9 an hour, run into barrier after barrier after barrier, can't keep it together, circle back to crisis. Now, so once again, starting in that process. So Circles says, okay, we want to kick in at that process where the job readiness and job placement is, offer community accountability, a place to question, another set of ears and eyes, and using our social capital when we can to say, okay, stay the course, keep the job past the 90 days, make it, let's stay in one place, in one housing situation for a continuous year, let's say, keep the kids in the same school, and allow this community to come in and support. And so it's not easy work. Throw money, thank God for the money that we have in the crisis piece of all this. But let's understand that it is a longer process.
Oh, yeah.
We know that people in generational poverty take 4 to 7 years to reach self-sufficiency. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so that's where we kick in a different place along the spectrum.
So this is a long-term process.
Yes.
This is not a run and gun, one and
No.
done kind of situation that you're investing in. And obviously, you mentioned not throwing money at the problem, but you're grateful for it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what you're suggesting to people is that, if you want to do this is a personal, long-term, you have to commit to this over a long period of time, years perhaps, with individuals and families, which actually make this process work. This is a really important and powerful concern. And obviously, from a Christian vantage point, we're thinking about this from an others-centered vantage point. Christianity is an others-centered point of view and religious approach to life and things. The whole point behind Titus, for instance, the Titus 3:1, 8, and 14, is that it's actually bracketed by two very important statements in 2:11 to 14 and 3:4 and 5, which focus on Jesus. Jesus makes this possible, and the whole point of being able to help others is because of this Christian view of life and things. We're going to be taking a one-song break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking again with Jill and Marie from Circles Indy and the important work that they do. Facebook Live, we're going to stay with you. Radio, we'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes. And when we do come back, we're going to be hearing some stories about things that are going on with Circles Indy. Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.TV at the Cool Group site. We'll be right back. when we do come back in and we still are Facebook Live, I always remind everybody that we're still live here.
Well, Marie and Jill need to give Rebecca a big shout out. Rebecca DeMoore is on, and she just loves you guys. And Betsy Whaley said that you guys are world changers, and she is just glad that you're on the network today. So we got several people feeding in on both lines. Good stuff.
Great. So this is the wonder of Facebook Live, and HV's got his going on, and I've got mine going on. He takes care of both of those. We've got the radio going on, the podcast later on, the Facebook Live is archived. I mean, all of these kinds of things.
What a miraculous
Well, wave at Betsy. She's on my page.
There you go.
We love you, Betsy. Thank you.
So they can still hear.
Oh, yeah.
They see us. See,
We
yes,
love
yes.
you. Thank you.
I always try to remind everybody of this because, just because we're off air on radio, we're still on air.
Okay.
And people see us. So,
The
that's
radio listener would
Oh,
go away if you just talk the whole show.
okay.
So they need some kind of break because they can't see the people on Facebook or
Okay.
they're engaged.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So somewhere along the line, I make a break like I just did, kind of at the end of this. You're all very positive comments here, and then I'll make the break point, and then when we come back in, I'll just kind of rehearse a few things that we talked about. But I was serious about kind of leaving people with the idea we're going to tell stories in the second part of this.
Sure.
I think it would be really powerful for you to tell some stories, names, first names, or whatever you want to do. But story is really what drives
Yeah, we can do
communication. Yeah. So I teach a course on writing, and I'm constantly trying to get my students to tell stories. How can you create a story out of data, for instance? I was telling them this week that if you have 10,000 pieces of data, you don't hit people with 10,000 pieces. You take one story out of that 10,000 and you make that the focal point, and then the 10,000 wraps around that. So the story platform is huge.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking of many.
I'm sure you have many after all these years. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a big deal. So, you feeling good so far?
Yes,
Yeah.
I am.
Good.
And I don't know where this fits, but I'm thinking of, in terms of putting a biblical worldview on what we're doing. And there's a story in Acts 3 where the lame man has been brought to the beautiful gate at the temple every day since his teenage years, and he's in his 40s at this point. And the disciples come and they look him in the face that day, and Scripture is specific about looking him in the face, and they bring healing to him, and he can enter into the worship for the first time. And so I really like that idea of looking him in the face, and they say, I can't give you money, but I can give you Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as I'm thinking about that verse, it dawned on me one day, how did this guy get there? Scripture tells us that he has his mother, but she's up in years, but he's been brought there so that he could perform the job of begging, which was a place where people could earn a living for themselves doing what they could do. So it was like a place in society for
The
this person.
marketplace, yeah.
Yeah, and he had a really good spot, so he kind of probably worked his way up to this good spot by a beautiful gate. But who got him there every day? His mom couldn't put him on her back and carry him. Somebody every day brought this man to the gate,
Yep.
and somebody took him home so that he could help himself. That's like an ally.
Let's start with that.
We got about 60 seconds. But one thing when I was listening, and you mentioned the commitment, when people want to take on the resources that you're giving non-monetarily, how do we get people who are in despair and desperate to understand commitment? Because I work in a lot of programs, and when you are desperate, commitment is a long time. And when you've never finished anything, commitment is a daunting task.
Yeah.
So when you finish something, you get that. But when you're just sitting up, how am I going to make it through the day?
Yeah. I
Talking
think
about 6 months later, it's tough on a lot of people in despair. So
I can address that.
Yeah. So we're hearing our commercial. So after the commercial, when I come back in.
Okay.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, man. HB is all about it today.
I'm all, my whole tagline is all community all the time.
Oh man,
That's how I send my messages.
we're better together.
Yeah.
So
There you go.
for Christian wisdom and daily life. Me.
And we are back. Woof and Woof Radio, RadioX.TV at the Cool Groove site, Wednesdays from 11 to 11:50. This week we are talking with Jill and Marie from Circles Indy, and we want to make sure everybody knows what that is. So Circles, with a plural, Indy, INDY.org. Go check this website out and see the good work that's being done here in and around Indianapolis. So, second half of our show, we want to tell some stories, and Marie, you had mentioned a story out of Scripture that you wanted to recount. So let's talk about that first.
One story that really resonates with me when I try to explain to people how an ally kind of functions, an intentional friend. We don't use the word mentor because it suggests a hierarchy. We want this to be an equal, reciprocal relationship. And so when I think of Acts 3 and the beggar at the beautiful gate in the temple, we know from other scripture that this man is in his 40s. He has been crippled from birth. He has a mom, but she's up there in years. And he's probably been doing this for a really long time. He's worked his way up to where his little mat is at a really good place at the beautiful gate. And he supports himself by begging. And every good Jew did two things. They gave alms to the poor, and they prayed at 3 o'clock every day. And so this setting in Scripture is at the 3 o'clock prayer time. A couple of disciples happened by, and Scripture says specifically that day they looked him in the eye. So it must, I am thinking, well, maybe other days they didn't. Maybe they rushed by, but that day they looked him in the eye and they said, I don't have any money, but I can give you Jesus. And they heal him, and he can go into the worshiping community for the first time in his life. And it says he dances and there's rejoicing. And I got to thinking about that scripture, and something in the back of my head said, well, how does he get there every day? And does he bring a packed lunch? And, how does he get to work? And how does he get home? And his elderly mother, does she put him on her back and carry him to the temple every day? There had to be a group of people committed to getting this man to work and home every day. And maybe they worked up a system and a schedule, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're going to take him and you pick him up. Somebody carried this man to his place every day, and somebody brought him home. There was more to his self-sufficiency than just his doing his job. There had to be somebody that enabled him to do his job. And that's how I liken that scripture to what an ally does. They're intentionally friends with this person, and their job is to say, how can I help you meet your goals? It might mean accompanying a circle leader to a doctor's appointment because it's been years since they've been to a doctor and they're terrified. I've accompanied circle leaders to really important meetings, and they'll hear middle class speak, and they'll look at me and say, what did they say? And I'll say, they said this, this, and this. And then I'll say, you have the right to ask anybody to repeat what they said, and just as an example of helping them find their voice. We help people find their voice. Most recently, here in town, one of our circle leaders was involved in, I don't know if anybody saw the news, but for a couple of weeks, lots of news around this trailer park on I-70 on the Near East Side that was being sold out from under the 70-plus under-resourced families who lived in these trailers on the Near West Side. Many of them, our circle leader included, had put every cent she had in June into purchasing this trailer that was 30 plus years old. It wasn't fully, it wasn't warm, but she was working on getting it fixed up. And in August, the landlord sold it out from under them, and they were told they had to move. And if they didn't move their trailers, they would be scrapped for metal, and they are not going to be able to leave with any assets. Because we had empowered this woman, she began to make phone calls. She brought legislators in who brought resources in. She brought the mayor in. She was on every news station. And I like to say that's because we helped empower her to speak up for herself. Now, the land is still sold, but she is accessing resources to get to a new place. That's one of the many stories, and I know Jill has a lot of stories about the folks that we're able and blessed to be able to know and work with.
This is a great story, and I'll just interject this one thing, and then we'll jump back to some stories. But I want to make sure that everybody hears me say this. What really ticks me off most about American culture is that we are so obsessed by the bottom line, and that the only thing that we really care about is profit. And the issue of anybody that's an individual who only cares about what's in their back pocket or in their purse, this is something that really kind of lords it over. It becomes a god to us in America. The kind of work that we're seeing and hearing about today in Circles Indy, it really is pushing back against the tide of the bottom line. Now, that's not to suggest anything bad about business. It doesn't suggest anything bad about ownership. What it does suggest is that we ought to be caring about other people. So
we want corporations to have a moral compass.
Yeah, well, wouldn't that be nice if they had a moral compass? Yes, I'll stand with you on that one for sure. So this is something that's really important for everybody here, that that you come right out and say things like this. I'm teaching on the minor prophets right now in my church, and over and over and over again, you see this. The real issue isn't about ethnic problems in Scripture. It's about poverty issues. Mm-hmm. It's about the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. Mm-hmm. And we see this come up constantly. So, all right, I've said my piece. I want to throw it back to you guys about some more stories, though, about the kinds of advocacies that you've been able to promote that will help people in whatever arena they're in.
Jill, would you like to share something?
Sure. So what I love about Circles is it has the structure that allows people to come together from different experiences. So, there's a saying we heard recently at Faith in Action conferences about going to the margins. Go out to the margins and meet people. But the question is, how do you do that? It's difficult. And so Circles gives the structure that allows you to have those different experiences. So some of my favorite stories of Circles are celebrating graduation. So several years ago, we had a circle leader who struggled through math class, through writing assignments, and she was at the Excel Center, but finally got to the point of graduation. And so there was a group of us from Circles that we were going to be there for her graduation.
Nice.
And we went, and it was just a heart-wrenching experience to see her walk across the stage. And then we asked her afterwards, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to celebrate? And the response was she was going to ride the bus back home. She didn't have family there. There was nobody there, but she was going to ride the bus back home. And so we said, let's go out. We need to celebrate this. And it was a really one of my favorite moments. And we also had a circle leader get her a bachelor's degree more recently. And so, again, just a group of us, being there to support the circle leader and celebrate together. Another story is one of our circle leaders connected with Habitat for Humanity. And for me, it was a different experience because oftentimes as a volunteer, community volunteer, you get to meet the family through the process of Habitat and celebrate, at the end. But this was a different because we got to know the family before they were in Habitat for Humanity and see all through that and then stay connected afterwards. And so, really, as you mentioned earlier, Circles has a structure that allows you, to participate in a variety of different ways. But when it comes down to it, it's about you want to be a friend, and as a friend, you stay involved and engaged over a long period of time.
Yeah.
Some of the folks in our group have been connected for 9-10 years. We've been family for each other. So.
The official commitment for an ally is 1 to 2 connections a month for 18 months, but most of those stay friends long beyond the 18 months. And the thing that we try to help our middle class folks to do is just put away the to-do list, they want to know, what do I do? And I just show up, and it will bubble to the top and become apparent how you can invest or be present in this relationship. Maybe you need to help somebody learn to drive. Maybe you need to help somebody learn to budget. Maybe they can teach you how to cook. Maybe they can teach you a skill that they have. We want this to be reciprocal. I am reminded of a time when one of our circle leaders needed to be in a court setting, and they were going all alone, and we showed up, and we ended up being character witnesses, and we kind of blew the judge away because of the support that we were able to surround this person with. And I think it affected the process. If need be, if there's a circle leader that has a special needs child, navigating IEPs, individual education plans, and going to the meeting with them just to be that second set of ears, helping them to navigate the middle class world once again. So it is a process of just presenting yourself for whatever the need is, and also helping you to know what boundaries you need to have in the process on both sides of the table. And circles, we eat together every Thursday night, so the table is an important part of what we do. It's actually a non-negotiable, and the meal is a part of the program. Vetted and trained child care providers. We partner with Tab Church. Tabernacle Pres at 4180 East 34th Street has been a partner with us since 2012. And when Jill mentioned our circle leader who became a Habitat owner, that started because they were a family at Tab. Tab invested in Habitat. Habitat came on board and brought corporate into it. And then as circles, we were part of the support. So it was like this perfect storm of wow, just imagine what we can do together kind of thing. So
one thing I like to say about circles is it helped me take away fear. So a lot of time people will ask me, aren't you afraid to go into the community or different parts of the community? And my response is, my friends are part of the community, so I want to be a friend and go to these places with them. If they have to go there, why shouldn't I go there as well? Yeah. And so it's relieving, I think, that it helps understand the community in a different way and takes away the fear.
Oh my, there's so much to say about all of that. I was really fascinated by what you said about the table, the hospitality, and that's a non-negotiable and you meet every week. Just as a sidebar comment, most every culture has something about hospitality woven through it in one form or another. Certainly true in the Middle East, certainly true in biblical contexts. I'm interested, though, to ask the follow-up to that question. When you sit at table with each other, when you are sharing a meal with each other, what does that do for the relationship?
It's the great equalizer. Everybody's the same at table.
Several of our circle leaders have shared that in their growing up, there were strict rules about eating and who is allowed to speak and table mannerisms, and so it's very eye-opening that Circles provides this community where everyone is allowed to speak, and it's there for everyone. And
what's really cool around table is when you come into Circles, you don't know who the allies are and who the circle leaders are. Right. And you could have somebody that's just left incarceration sitting with a radiologist from Community North having conversation, and it just, the things that happen around table are things that we can't even control, and resources that are, you need Microsoft Office, I can help you, or Office 360, I can help you get that on your computer, or You don't have an email? Well, let me help you figure out how to have an email. And does anybody know anybody who can fix a toilet? And they're not going to take me for a lot of money. This is called community. And when there's a need, oftentimes we find that our circle leaders don't have beds. We just say to the community, shoot it out in an email, hey, anybody got any extra beds? We've got some people who are sleeping on the floor, and we are able to resource that circle leader with a bed. These are just small examples.
We have a saying that circles works.
Circles work.
Circles works, yeah,
Circles work.
absolutely.
And this is really a picture of what I would hope the church could be, but often isn't, because we get caught up in the do and give, but we don't move on to the equally important engagement. And that's, once again, why Jill came up with these categories for volunteering. We go into churches and we help, churches want to be involved in their community. That, what do you want to do? We want to be involved in community. Have you thought about changing the way you do it? And because 9 times out of 10, what they're doing is in the do and give category. Let's talk about how you might be engaging. What's that look like?
Let's talk about that. Jill, I was interested in this too, because when we were downstairs talking ahead of the show, you kind of went through the 4 or 5 points that you have. Why don't you rehearse those for everybody, just to give everybody a sense of what Marie's telling us about?
So these came about in 2016, early 2016. Circles was undergoing a shift, and had been under the sponsorship of Julian Center, but was looking for a new home. And so we did not want to recreate anything that was already in the community, but we saw there was a niche of when people come to volunteer at Circles, it's a different kind of volunteering. And so we wanted to educate a little bit more about that and saw it as an opportunity. So we formed the nonprofit BRICS Alliance, and BRICS is an acronym for Building Relationships and Community is Key for Systemic Change and Sustainability. Our S.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful, which is why we go by BRICS, but it has meaning. And so BRICS has 3 pillars of education around volunteerism, example, and Circles is the example of relationship-based volunteering, and then engagement. So under the education around volunteerism, we had come up with 4 different categories of, when you think of any kind of volunteering, they can really be there's a lot of gray areas, but it can be bucketed into 4 different categories in consideration of how close you are to the people, the group that you're trying to impact. And so the give category is shoe drives, clothing drives, fundraising, walkathon, and you're really far removed from, you don't know who it is that is eventually going to be helped or receive the donations, but you want to do good in that way. And then give is where it's a service, skills-based volunteering. You may connect with the people that you're trying to help, put a face to the group. It's more of an acquaintance, though. You don't really have a long-term connection, but you can visualize or put a face to it. And then the engage category is where Circles is an example of the purpose of the volunteering is to bring people together to form a relationship and grow in understanding from both perspectives. And then the advocate goes beyond advocacy, but it's really volunteering in a way that helps somebody have their own voice, to tell their own stories, because the stories are so important, but it's so much better when somebody tells their own story than telling it on behalf of someone else. And so finding opportunities where, if there's a poverty forum in the community, to say, hey, to my friend, you need to be there and tell your story because that needs to be heard. And so those are the give, do, engage, and advocate are the 4 categories of volunteering that BRICS Alliance came up with in hopes that everyone will think about. Yeah.
Now, you have had some great success in and around Indianapolis in what you're doing. Let's kind of finalize some of the things that we've been talking about here today. We've just got a couple minutes left. Talk a little bit about the necessity of connecting bricks to circles, because some people are going to wonder, okay, circles, bricks, I got a lot of S's in there.
Yeah.
What in the world's going on? So give us about a 30-second summary about the distinctiveness between those.
Circles is curriculum. It's a movement. It's a national movement. We have a chapter. We also have a chapter in Johnson County Circles. But Circles has to have a fiscal home. BRICS is the fiscal home for Circles. It is a part of BRICS. That's the umbrella. And so BRICS is broader than Circles. Jill, is that a pretty good explanation? Circles is the movement. BRICS is the charity or the nonprofit.
Yeah, BRICS gives the financial base for
exactly.
making Circles work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really an important understanding, so everybody gets that. And it's BRICS Alliance
Inc.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so BRICS Alliance Inc. What's the website?
www.bricsallianceinc.org.
Okay, so it's a .org.
BRICSalliance.org.
BRICSalliance.org. I'm sorry, it's right here in front of me.
Okay, and it's circlesindy.org.
Yep.
Okay, very important to remember that these are nonprofits, hence the .org is important here. If I were going to give you 30 seconds each to kind of finalize some of the things that you wanted to say, tell us in your own words why this is so important to you. Tell us, what would you say?
I think that in our day and age, bringing people together across differences is going to be the salvation for our country in a big macro picture. I think we've got to bridge those gaps of difference with relationship.
Bridging gaps of difference with relationship. That's a tagline right there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I need to write that down.
You need to write that down. Well, you've got it archived right now. Jill, how about you, from your perspective?
I think just thinking about volunteering in different ways, and we focus a lot on terminology, and so by providing terminology to different ways to volunteer opens doors to how to do it in a different way.
Ooh, opens doors. Yeah, this is an important metaphor as well. You've been listening to Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Group site. We come to you on Wednesdays from 11 to 11:50. You can find all of our archived Facebook Live as well as the iTunes. We have 2 different platforms for that. You can go to the iTunes store, check out Warp and Woof Radio, Comenius Institute. Go to YouTube. You can find us there as well at YouTube, Comenius Institute at YouTube. But we also then have our other websites, ComeniusInstitute.org.com, and then warpandwoof.org. And you can find all kinds of things there, background on the show, as well as background on all of our guests who have been seen there. You'll follow us on Facebook. Those of you who are watching us right now on Facebook and can connect with us later on. That's also a real special way to actually make this happen. Next week, we're going to be having Dee Williams back with us again. Really excited for Sierra to be back again. This is, I think, their 3rd time. We want to promote the good work that they're doing, maybe even connect you guys with that group, which is a fantastic organization that helps especially in the Black community with housing. That's a whole discussion point. That's a whole discussion point. We should have that conversation. And once again, everybody, this is one of those things that we're just creating this web of folks in and around Indianapolis. We do this through Radio Next. Grateful for H.B. Bell, who takes care of the producing of this show. Grateful for Josh Collingwood behind the scenes, and also Polly Riddell, who makes some connections with us out in the wide world. Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We'll be back again next week. See you then.